Welcome to Above Replacement Radio. I am your host, Chris Gianta. I might be becoming a bad baseball fan who can't enjoy the romantic things because of advanced statistics. 15 years from now, I want to be on the early baseball committee. Over there on the other side of the screen is Daniel Curran.
I literally have the Fangraphs hoodie, the baseball reference t-shirt, just repping some stats, you know what I'm saying?
It's not necessarily Hall of Fame. It's not necessarily above average, but we can guarantee you we are better than just the standard replacement level college sophomore.
And welcome to Above Replacement Radio. We're talking baseball kind of whenever. I'm your host, Chris Gianta. Over there on the other side of the screen is Daniel Curran. How you doing, Daniel?
You know, Chris, this would normally be the part of the show where I say that I'm doing well and that we got some fun baseball to talk about, like I have for, 270 something episodes in a row. But I'm not doing well today. It's been a roughly 24 hours, maybe 23 or so hours since we learned the big news that we'll be getting into today. And, I think we've been kind of waiting to hop on these mics for ever since now.
Yeah, and it's been nice. It's been nice to have the 24-hour period so you can kind of stew and like figure out what your thoughts are on the whole situation. But yeah, yesterday for me, I was driving around. I was like, this is a great weather day. It's been cloudy and muggy for like what seems like the entire last week. It's rained a lot. I'm really excited that I get this nice sunny day to play with. It's going to be a good day. And then around 1:20-ish p.m., somewhere around there, or maybe I think it was like 12:30. I see text messages in our group chat actually, which is where I found out. And then I go immediately to Twitter because I figure something's wrong, and I see that the Red Sox fired Chaim Bloom, their president of baseball, or no, their
Chief baseball officer.
Chief baseball officer.
Yeah.
Basically the acting GM, the guy who is, allegedly calling all the shots. There is more nuance to that, which we'll get into. But yeah, they fired their chief baseball officer. He was hired in early 2020 / late 2019. He has been around. His tenure lasted for the entirety of our show. Like we've
Pretty much,
been,
yeah.
Above Replacement Radio has been around for the entire Chaim Bloom era, which is, so it really makes this story and this era unique to us. But the history of his reign is definitely, it's been talked about for a while. It's been discussed a lot by Red Sox fans, basically pretty much since like the 2022 trade deadline. He's gotten a lot of criticism from a lot of different people. I don't think in Red Sox history there has been such strong opinions on both sides of the spectrum, in that him doing a good job and him doing a bad job. There's never been such a split. I feel like the more mainstream Red Sox fans did not like what he was doing. Well, I think it's sort of a minority that has liked what he's done, but Daniel and I are both in that minority. I think just paying a little more attention and focusing on the nuance between what ownership does and what the front office does, it puts us in that minority a little bit.
Yeah. So, I mean, Chris and I will be getting pretty deep into this today. And as many people may know that are listening to this, or if you're learning for the first time, Chris and I were both, I would say, pretty pro Chaim Bloom throughout his tenure. We're definitely anti Chaim Bloom firing. So that is the perspective that you're going to be getting here. And I think we should just start with the Mookie Betts trade because, that is, fair or not, that is probably going to be a lot of his legacy to a lot of Red Sox fans. He's going to be known as the GM that we brought in for those bridge years when we traded Mookie Betts and blah, blah, blah. And I think most Red Sox fans, even a lot of Chaim's critics, understand Chaim's actual role in that, which was he was following John Henry's orders, right? I mean, he was hired in to be the guy that traded Mookie Betts so that, they had a fall guy and whatever. But you know, Chaim Bloom was, and I think it's more clear to say now that he's out, he was brought in to trade Mookie Betts and then get blamed for it and then get fired for it. And that is now, we've kind of seen that transpire now throughout the 4 years. The Red Sox reported, there were several reports in August of 2019, a month before Dave Dombrowski was fired, that the Red Sox were going to listen to offers on Mookie Betts that offseason. So the idea that Chaim came in and said, "Hey, we should trade Mookie Betts," completely false. I don't think a lot of people think that, but we need as many people as possible to understand that the Mookie Betts trade was an ownership decision that Chaim Bloom was brought in to execute, and that is what happened. John Henry was the one who did it. Tom Warner, Sam Kennedy, everyone in that front office, they were the ones that said, we need to trade Mookie Betts. And Chaim Bloom was brought in to be that guy.
Yes, that's exactly what happened. And there was actually an Athletic article that I was reading yesterday that said there were talks at the 2019 trade deadline, which was crazy. I mean, I'm not sure. It hasn't really been talked about that much, so I'm not sure what the sourcing is on that. But even if it was a slight talk, there was something there because, yeah, there was obviously a little bit of a grift between where ownership thought they were at and where Mookie Betts thought they were at, especially in those negotiations. It didn't seem like negotiations were going really great. And that's, a lot of that can be blamed on ownership for sure. And yeah, yeah, he was brought in to get the Red Sox under the luxury tax. Like, let's not forget that. And that is not something that chief baseball officers, presidents of baseball operations, nor general managers typically really care about. They want to put the best team out there, and usually that comes from spending money. It was on ownership. That ownership wanted to get under the CBT threshold so that they could spend less money, and ultimately decided that trading the best player in the franchise in at least the last 50 years, that was the best way to get under that CBT threshold. So like it is frustrating. Like there is that minority that says he was the guy that traded Mookie Betts. That was far from his decision. And I think I'm glad that most people understand that. As you mentioned, most time critics still, most time Bloom critics still understand that, yeah, that's on ownership. You can complain about the return, but even in that scenario, yeah, like everyone knew that the Red Sox wanted to get rid of Mookie Betts, so that took away a little bit of their leverage, and also they had to attach David Price to get under the luxury tax because of how high they were above that marker. So adding Price to it also took away from the return. But yes, you definitely have to start with the Mookie Betts trade there. And along with that, I think a thing we have to discuss also is I think the Red Sox fan base is not used to having to blame ownership for stuff, especially considering, since they took over, it had been pretty smooth sailing from whenever they took over, like 02,
03, yeah. It's 01 maybe until 2018.
From the early 2000s through 2019, it was pretty smooth sailing. They were always near the top of the payroll. They didn't really have anything, like there was nothing to blame ownership on. So any front office activity, whether it be from the GM Dan Duquette, Theo Epstein, Ben Sherrington, Dave Dombrowski, like it was under the approval of ownership, and ownership was allowing all that to happen, so that when ownership steps in and has something to say on the baseball activity, people still blame the acting GM or the chief baseball officer in this scenario, because they think, ownership and the GM has had a great relationship, or at least seemed to have a great relationship for about 20 years now. But so when we're trading Mookie Betts and we're 11th or 12th in opening day payroll, it must be on the GM because ownership's been pretty consistent. But we'll get into why that's been sort of incorrect.
Yeah, and I mean, I think just all of this goes back to the fact that there was someday in 2019 when John Henry decided that he no longer wanted to act as a big market owner. He still is to this day, but he just decided that he wanted to decided he didn't have enough money to put the team in a position to win at the consistent rate that they were winning throughout the previous 20-ish years of his ownership, right? They were just coming off of 2018, the year that they had won the most games in franchise history and the fourth World Series. And they re-signed, or they extended Chris Sale, they extended Xander Bogaerts, they re-signed Nathan Eovaldi, and that was it. That was like John Henry just something for whatever reason checked out after that day. And it came time to pay Mookie Betts, who I would like to remind people that the only publication that has reported anything about the Mookie Betts contract negotiations, whether it be in 2016 and 2017 and any year, is the Boston Globe, and that is a publication that is owned and basically operated by John Henry. Anything that people have said regarding whatever talks happened with Mookie Betts has only been John Henry's word, which means there is a certain narrative that is being pushed. That is a matter of fact. It was reported that Mookie Betts was offered $300 million by the Red Sox. He turned it down and countered with $400 million. It was reported that Mookie Betts never wanted to stay in Boston, that he wanted to test the free agent market. Mookie Betts has come out and said the exact opposite time and time again. He said that he thought he was going to spend his career in Boston, that he wanted to spend the rest of his career in Boston. And John Henry pushed a narrative that was simply false. And I know that this is kind of backtracking away from Chaim Bloom, but I need to provide the context as to why John Henry is the guy that should be to blame for the last 4 years and how everything has gone. Because let's be honest, for as much as we've defended Chaim Bloom, Chris, the Red Sox haven't been a fun team to watch since 2019. That is an objective fact. 2021 was an outlier. Like they were, it kind of felt like they were playing on house money that year, and they made a World Series run. But the fact of the matter is the Red Sox have not been the team that we grew up watching in the last 5 years. And it sucks. It hasn't been fun. But I need everyone to understand who John Henry is and who he's been over these last 5 years before we dive into everything else.
Yeah, it's extremely necessary to talk about ownership because, as you say, there's a large amount of blame to be put on them. That's a lot put on Chaim Bloom. And during the Bloom era, the Red Sox, I put out a tweet earlier this morning, the Red Sox were 267 and 262, which isn't ideal for a fan base, especially, a big market, a team that has consistently, during this ownership run, consistently been in the playoffs, consistently been actually winning World Series. They've won 4 in the last 20 years now. Still, even despite, not winning one since 2018. But they've still won about 1 every 5 years, which is pretty crazy to think about. But yeah, it's to understand why Chaim Bloom is getting a lot of blame and why he's been Sam Kennedy, the Red Sox president / CEO, he was in a media scrum saying like this is not where we want to be at, like where we are in the standings is not where we want to be at. And it's kind of implying the blame is on Chaim Bloom when, a lot of it can be blamed on John Henry. And it starts with the Mookie Betts trade, and it's sort of continued since then.
Yeah, so the thing that Jeff Passan mentioned in his tweet regarding the situation yesterday was that in the 4 years that the Red Sox have won the World Series, in the last 20 years, their payroll has been like top 3 at least, maybe top 5 at the absolute worst, if I'm remembering incorrectly, but they've had a top 5 payroll every single year. And payroll, like we mentioned, and how much, is spent on a team in a year, that's an owner's decision so much more than it's a GM or president of baseball ops or a chief baseball officer's decision. And like I said, this is what John Henry ordered Chaim Bloom to do. The thing that a lot of people have been saying, and it is true, is that Chaim Bloom was kind of set up to fail because John Henry expected so much out of him and was not going to accept anything less than perfection. Chaim Bloom was expected to replenish the Red Sox farm system, stay under the luxury tax, and win consistently which doing those three things all at the same time don't really happen. And also, not only did he expect to do those three things, but he wanted him to do them in not just the best division in baseball right now, but the most competitive division that we've ever seen. Like, all five AL East teams are going to finish possibly over 500 this year. That's not happened in a season ever. So Chaim Bloom was expected to perform, essentially a miracle, something that no GM in the history of Major League Baseball could do, as far as I'm concerned. That is, win consistently, spend not a lot of money, or spend less money than ideally you would want to spend, and replenish a farm system in that kind of competitive division. That is an insane ask. And for what it's worth, Chaim Bloom actually has, to a degree, done all those things, right? Like, he brought the team to the ALCS in 2021. He's on pace to have them, to potentially give them a winning season this year, in a year where they were expected to lose 90 games. Like, he's done, and obviously the farm system is fantastic right now. We've mentioned the payroll being lower than it's been. And yeah, they're in an insane division. They would be like in first in the Central right now, or competing for the division in the AL Central right now.
Yeah, they would be. Yeah, I think they'd be like 3 or 4 games back of the Twins, and that doesn't even factor like they'd have an easier schedule if they were in the Central. They'd probably be winning the Central. They're probably a better team than the Twins, realistically. But yeah, that leads into a couple of points that I definitely have regarding the situation. And the first starts with the fact that most championship teams in general have a little bit of fallout after, or they have a period of fallout after their competitive window. We saw that sort of with the Phillies. Like, they won in 2008. That was the start of their like playoff reign. Made the playoffs every year from 2008 to 2011, and then sort of had like a fallout, because when you go full go, you trade some prospects, you spend a lot of money. The owner sort of a lot of the times gets tired of spending all that money, and then there's a little bit of fallout. Phillies didn't make the playoffs for about a decade after, which isn't the goal, but it happened. The 09 Yankees, they really went in for that 09 season with signing Sabathia and Teixeira. Those contracts didn't look good in the last half of those deals, and they also probably traded some prospects, and from 2013 to 2016 they had their fallout. Like, they were not the Yankees that they had been come to known. They were kind of an average team from 13 to 16. 2015 Royals, they haven't been to the playoffs since. 2016 Cubs, they haven't won a playoff game since 2017, which is not ideal for them, but they had a bit of fallout. And so yeah, that leads into the 2018
The Nationals
Red Sox
as well. Yeah.
Nationals are a great example. They went full go for a while. Sacrificed some prospects, sacrificed a lot of money, and spent big on some guys that are now heading into their mid to late 30s, or at some point were heading into their late 30s. So yeah, like, there's a bit of fallout with the Nationals. Nationals have been rebuilding for a couple years now. So that leads into the 2018 Red Sox. They went more full go than many, many organizations have, from about 2016 to 2018. Heading into 2016, they had one of the best farm systems in baseball, along with great developing young talent that was already at the major league level, most notably Mookie Betts, obviously, also Jackie Bradley Jr. They had Andrew Benintendi coming up. Yohan Moncada and Michael Kopech were both very highly ranked. And then in that 2016 to 2018 window, they spent a crazy amount of money, which we loved. By the way, this is no shame on the Dave Dombrowski era. It was a good era. But this is what it was. He traded a bunch of top prospects, including Moncada, Kopech, even Anderson Espinoza, who was a top 100 prospect for Drew Pomeranz.
Yeah, he was 19 at the time.
Yeah, he was ranked extremely, extremely highly. And in the end, they get a World Series out of it in 2018, which is fantastic. That's what you want when you go full go like the Red Sox did from 2016 basically to 2019, because they also had their share of deals in 2019 with the extensions of Sale, Bogarts, and the signing of Eovaldi. But naturally, they went full go, they depleted their farm system, and there's going to be a little bit of fallout after. And that's what leads into the situation that Chaim Bloom came into. They were very far above the luxury tax, which I guess John Henry was tired of paying. And then along with that, they had just come off an 84-win season. It was a disappointing year. They were kind of, their bullpen was a disaster. Their starting pitching wasn't great. They had a great offense, largely, propped up by Mookie Betts. But John Henry was like, we need to get rid of Mookie Betts. I know he's our best player, best franchise player in the last at least 50 years. You could argue he's even better than Carl Yastrzemski. You could argue that Betts is the best since Ted Williams, which would be best franchise player in 60 years. So Chaim, we have this 84-win team. We you usually want to improve on this team to, they're a couple pieces away from making the playoffs, but we want you to trade Mookie Betts. And also, by the way, we have the worst farm system in baseball. So we don't really have any future pieces coming up. So maybe this Betts trade will help out, but we also have to attach price to get under this luxury tax. So it kind of, we're not going to get a crazy amount out of this, most likely. So there is that. And then also the 2020 season was a disaster for a variety of reasons. Chris Sale had to get Tommy John, like, hey, our highest paid pitcher, he's also getting Tommy John. He's going to be out until the end of, near the end of 2021. Eduardo Rodriguez, our second best pitcher, he's going to get myocarditis for the 2020 season. And also Alex Cora, our manager, he's been suspended for the entire 2020 season. And maybe we'll be able to get him back in 2021. So you could pin that. It is funny to mention, like, 3 last place finishes in 4 years. Yeah. None of what happened in 2020 was Chaim Bloom's fault. Which
also,
is
it was like the chillest last place season ever, because all we had to do was watch them go 24-36.
Yes, and then get the highest ranked prospect, consensus highest ranked prospect in the next year's draft, which is, that was pretty solid. So yeah, Bloom was brought into an absolutely horrible situation, as horrible as a situation you can be in 2 years after a World Series. And we could get into the job he did eventually, but that's providing context into the situation he's been brought into.
Right. So I think the next point that I want to shift into is kind of just talking about what I believe is, what people think was Chaim's biggest downfall. And I believe that pretty much any criticism that is mainstream about Chaim Bloom can be traced back to John Henry at any point. The biggest thing that people have brought up time and time again, and I get it, is his lack of aggressiveness, that he was never willing to make the big move. That, every trade deadline, every offseason, we would come in and be like, all right, we got a couple interesting pieces, but that's kind of it. Like, we didn't sign this big guy. We didn't trade for this guy. What's up with that? Why does this keep happening to us? And again, I think, first of all, Chaim Bloom was allowed to sign one marquee free agent in his time, which was Trevor Story. And we were even lucky to have gotten that, because at the time, Trevor Story was basically the last marquee free agent on the market before the 2022 season, right? There was that period before the lockout where everyone was signing places because they wanted to not have to worry about their free agency throughout however long the lockout was going to last. And they came up empty there. And then going into going out of the lockout, everyone was signing left and right. Trevor Story was essentially the last guy, and the Red Sox got him. And a lot of Red Sox fans will probably remember that throughout several big free agencies, or even medium free agencies, small free agencies, whatever, there were guys that the Red Sox were in on, that they had interest in, that they were talking to, that they made offers to, that they didn't land. And that is Chaim Bloom doing his part, saying that he wants to get this guy, that he has a price range in mind, and then it's on John Henry to actually put the money on the table. And it never happened. That's just what it is. It's John Henry not being willing to sign the free agents that Chaim Bloom wanted him to sign. Like, when you're talking about any free agent that's worth more than like 60, 70 mil a year, that's an owner's decision far more than it's a GM slash man slash, president of baseball ops or whoever's decision. Like signing, like I know that like, you give Dombrowski credit for signing David Price to that deal, but that was ultimately Dave Dombrowski saying, "Hey, I want Price. This is the price." Didn't, pun unintended there. And
Yeah.
Henry going, "Okay, yeah, let's do it." Right. But when Bloom did it, he said, "Hey, I want player X. Here's the price." And John Henry says, "Nope, can't do that. Sorry. But hey, I guess we could sign Trevor Story because that's the last guy." And John Henry has always been about his public persona, right? I mean, anytime, like John Henry is a guy, and most MLB owners are like this, but they're off the internet, they're kind of out of touch with what people think of them, which is probably the right move because I think any owner is, subject to any sort of criticism at any point. And they don't want to face it, which is natural. But John Henry has not. Chris Cotillo came on this show about a month ago, and he told us that John Henry has not formally spoken to the media since the Mookie Betts trade, and that was 3.5 years ago at this point that he has actually opened himself up to the media's questions. And if you remember from back this offseason, he was at the Winter Classic, for the Bruins game at Fenway, and he got booed relentlessly by the crowd. And what did he do? He signed Rafael Devers the next day because he realized, oh gosh, the people don't like me. I got to do the thing that people want me to do, right? So with that being said, John Henry has always, and I think we can say this now that Chaim Bloom is gone without sounding like conspiracy theorist, but John Henry hired Chaim Bloom to be the guy that takes attention off of him. The not wanting to be aggressive, the not wanting to make the big move. That was always a thing that John Henry wanted to put Chaim Bloom in his place for. Whether it's the Mookie Betts trade, whether it's the cutting salary, getting under the luxury tax, not wanting to spend, all of that goes back to John Henry. And I'll go back anyway. That was a little bit of a tangent into my main point, but let's look at the 2023 trade deadline. Because a lot of people gave Chaim Bloom criticism for not really budging. They didn't buy, they didn't sell, they didn't do a whole lot. They traded for Luis Arias, which was their main move. To a lot of people, it was very underwhelming. And you got to keep in mind that John Henry's, ordered job for Chaim Bloom was to win and replenish the farm system. Like, he didn't take away that duty at the trade deadline. That was still very much Chaim's job. And at that point, if people wanted him to make the big deal, if they wanted him to trade for Dylan Cease, if they wanted him to trade for player X or trade player X away, you were compromising one of those two things, because if you're going to, let's say he wanted to trade for Dylan Cease, that's going to cost him 2 of the top 5 prospects in the organization. You're compromising winning and, actually holding up the farm system that he had spent years building. And ultimately, he chose to hold up the farm system at the sacrifice of a couple wins, which, by the way, now that we're in hindsight, and I said this before the trade deadline, and it's turned out to be pretty correct, but if you look at virtually any starting pitcher that was sold at the deadline or rumored to have been possibly sold going into the deadline, almost none of them have been good. Dylan Cease has like a 7 ERA since the trade deadline. Jack Flaherty has like a 6 ERA for the Orioles. Michael Lorenzen has an 8 ERA since his no-hitter. Lucas Giolito, we've documented very well, right? I mean, I think everyone knows what the situation's been there. It hasn't been a good trade deadline for buyers, and for sellers, I mean, the Red Sox didn't really have a ton. Like, they could have traded Adam Duvall, they could have traded James Paxton and gotten like the number 45 prospect in the Dodgers system that wouldn't have made it to the majors. Maybe they could have traded Alex Verdugo, but even then, there's not a whole lot that they could have done. The best thing, in hindsight, from a buyer's perspective, the best thing they could have done at this trade deadline was trading for like Jordan Montgomery, who was going to get them another 2 wins, and they would finish at 83 and 79 instead of 81 and 81. Again, this is Chaim making the decision to try to do the best thing to balance the things that John Henry ordered him to do. And when you consider that, it was probably fair to not really move that much at the trade deadline.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to to back off this, I'll definitely get back into the trade deadline stuff. But as a point you were making earlier about ownership and especially in the off season, like what's been going on, because that's where the money's spent is in the off season. And one story that like I think people when Nathan Eovaldi was popping off earlier this season, everyone was like, I can't believe Bloom didn't get this guy, and I can't believe that it was Bloom. The story the story that MLB.com writer Ian Brown sort of professed on, I think it was Steve Peralt's podcast. I think it was Beyond the or Inside the Monster.
Inside the Monster, yeah.
Inside the Monster. And he talked about how Eovaldi was offered something good by the Red Sox early in the offseason. Eovaldi rejected it, wanted to go out in the market. Eovaldi goes out into the market. He does not get the money from other teams that he wants or thought he was worth. And then he goes back to the Red Sox and was like, hey, how about that earlier offer? And the Red Sox apparently in the organization were like, okay, we've signed, Yoshida, we've signed Turner, Jansen, Martin, haven't signed Kluber yet, but that was kind of the supplemental move after Eovaldi. But we've signed all these guys, we don't really have the money to sign you. I don't think those, like, logically, those words aren't coming from Chaim Bloom. Those are coming from
not at all
from ownership. That's the reason why Nathan Eovaldi was not signed this past offseason. That's the reason why the starting rotation is in a worse state than they would have been with Nathan Eovaldi. So they signed Corey Kluber, and yeah, that signing has been a disaster. It looked way better back then, and I think we both agreed we would have rather had Eovaldi, but kind of understood like Kluber could potentially be something. Turned out he was nothing, but he was $7 million less expensive this year than Nathan Eovaldi was, and he was $24 million less expensive overall than Nathan Eovaldi was in that contract. And I think that's what John Henry was thinking about, not Chaim Bloom. So I think that's one great example of how ownership was much to blame for the non-aggression for especially free agents regarding the Red Sox over the past few years. And like, I don't know, I want more people to see that. That's for sure. Along with that, there is the fact, I think something you mentioned about Jeff Passan's tweet, like they were top 3 in payroll each year that they've won the World Series under Fenway Sports Group. And they were 11th this year, I think, is what the tweet said. They were 11th in baseball this year, which, that's good. That's good. But considering the situation, like, and how the past few years have been, it's not going to create like a winning club for the Red Sox. They needed to spend if they wanted to compete this year, and they didn't. And that's mostly on ownership. Apparently their opening day payroll, and I read this on The Athletic yesterday, their opening day payroll, it was the lowest the Red Sox ranked in opening day payroll since 1997. It's been 26 years since they ranked that low in opening day payroll. That's not Chaim Bloom's decision. That is on ownership. And there have been instances under the Fenway Sports Group era where ownership has really as a public relations thing, really wanted to spend and get people to get on board with the Red Sox, and probably made the, Theo Epstein or Ben Cherington make some decisions they didn't really want to make and sign some guys maybe they didn't really want to sign, didn't think were smart deals. I think that most notably with the Pablo Sandoval and Hanley Ramirez signings before the 2015 season. Like
Carl Crawford as well.
Carl Crawford, like not smart deals, but they wanted to sell tickets. They wanted to let the Red Sox fans know that they were on board. But in this case, ownership wanted to spend less money and blame it on the front office.
Yeah. So I think I want to get into my next point now. And this is I think this is the thing that's really been frustrating me the most over this, really over the last 4 years, but especially now that it's happened. And again, I'm saying this now because Chaim Bloom is gone and I don't sound as like a conspiracy theorist, because it all sounds a lot more true now than it did before the firing happened. But the thing that really frustrates me the most is that this reaction, the reaction that the like anti-Haim crowd has shown, is exactly what John Henry orchestrated throughout these 4 years. John Henry specifically has always wanted to shift the blame elsewhere. He's a guy that doesn't like being accountable. He's a guy that, always wants to look good. He like anytime he shows up to the media, it's because he either really needs to because he just traded Mookie Betts, or he really wants to look good, right? Like he was at the Devers press conference because, hey, look at me, I did this great thing. I signed the guy that you guys want me to sign, right? Like I did the thing, like everyone cheer me. He's always been about his own public perception and wanting people to not to like him and what he's doing. And he knew going into 2019 or going out of 2019 that he was about to do a lot of things that the fans weren't going to like. So what does he do? He hires Chaim Bloom, a guy that had just come from the Tampa Bay Rays. What were the Tampa Bay Rays known about in 2019? Not spending a lot of money and winning, right? Like they were the team that was, they were the Moneyball team at the time. Like they were the team that had the 30th ranked payroll and they won 90 whatever games in 2019. And they were hiring that guy. And the narrative that a lot of the media in Boston, a lot of fans took on was, oh no, like they're signing the small market guy, like they're going to perform like a small market team now. And that's exactly what John Henry aimed for, right? He hired a guy specifically from, I think it's specifically from a small market team that can then, he decided, all right, now that I got this guy, I'm not going to spend a lot of money. And you have people being like, all right, Chaim, it's not Tampa anymore. Let's go. It's Boston. You got to spend the money, right? And while John Henry's hiding in the shadows, not spending the money, Chaim is getting the blame for it because it's what he knew in Tampa, right? Like he's doing the thing that he had previously had success in his last job. And now that he is out, they have the people celebrating that Chaim was the guy that was like the reason the Red Sox weren't spending money and they weren't being aggressive and blah blah blah. And this is exactly what John Henry wants you to think. Like you are falling for his trick. If you think that, if you're the guy that's celebrating Chaim Bloom's downfall and celebrating his firing, this is how John Henry wanted you to react in 2019 when he hired Chaim and knew that all of this was going to happen, right? John Henry knew that he was going to put Chaim in an impossible situation. He was going to make him trade the franchise player and replenish the farm system and not make the big moves and not spend the money while also, pretending to try to win, right? Like, and they're only 500 now, and it's convenient for the Red Sox to point to the last 20 years and be like, well, look at this, look at the success that we had from 2004 to 2018. We won 4 championships, and now we're not very good, so this is unacceptable, and this is not the standard, right? It's easy and convenient for them to point at that, but they're the ones that secretly changed the philosophy from within, and Chaim was always going to be the fall guy, right? Like, now, we've seen it now that he's been fired, that they're throwing him under the bus and they're saying, well, we want to win. Sam Kennedy's at the press conference saying, we're here to win championships, implying that Chaim wasn't. So the thing that frustrates me the most, again, is people letting John Henry get away with what he's done to this team in the last 4 years, because Chaim was designed to be the guy that shifts the attention away from John Henry, and he's done exactly that with this fan base.
Yeah, 100% there. I think, over time, it seems more and more deliberate that John Henry hired someone from Tampa Bay. Could have been even like Cleveland, like he could have done that after 2019, especially like Cleveland had that pedigree at the time. They'd won many divisions on a small payroll.
Even like Oakland was coming off of back-to-back playoff appearances at the time.
Yeah, but he wasn't gonna he probably wasn't gonna hire someone from an organization that's very analytically developed and spends a lot of money, like the Dodgers or the Astros, or even like, I don't know, the San Francisco Giants. They didn't really have that pedigree at that time, but specifically the Dodgers or Astros, he wasn't going to sign an assistant GM or a director of player development out of there, because those teams have been known to develop guys and also spend a lot of money. Dodgers, obviously, consistently a top 3 payroll. Astros right now are like top 5 consistently. When they were, in that phase where they were winning 100 games in a row were a top 10, top 5 usually payroll. But yeah, he picked the guy from Tampa Bay because he figured fans will think, oh, the chief baseball officer is in charge of spending the money, which is not the case at all. But I think it was easy to sort of fool Red Sox fans like that because there hasn't been that grift between owners. There's never been that before the Bloom era. There was never that grift between ownership and GM / whatever, president of baseball ops / chief baseball officer. There was never that grift between them because they were pretty much on board with the same things, usually on, getting the best players possible, spending on good free agents. Like that's what it was like from the early 2000s through 2019. And that changed after 2020. And it was a correlation that Chaim Bloom happened to be there for all those years. But that is on John Henry.
Yeah, and if it wasn't Chaim Bloom, it was going to be the other guy that they hired. Like they when they fired Dave Dombrowski, the idea was the next guy is going to come in here and we're going to make him the fall guy. If it wasn't Chaim Bloom, it would have been, Joe Schmo from Cleveland, right? Like it would have been anyone. And by the way, I want to say, like, I don't think Chaim was the perfect executive. Like, I'm not the guy that's gonna like agree with every single thing that he did. I'll acknowledge that like there are things that I wish he did better, here and there in the baseball operations department. But I mean, I think the main point of this entire thing is to highlight how he was not really given the fairest shot here, and he was designed from the very beginning to be the fall guy. I'm glad you mentioned Dave Dombrowski, Chris, because I do want to get into something that I talked about to you last night that I want to remind people of. When Dave Dombrowski left the Detroit Tigers in 2015, he left them as a barren wasteland, right? I mean, they were, getting out of their championship window. They had an aging core. They were in the middle of a last place season, a disappointing year for them. They had the worst farm system in baseball, and they had an aging core. Like it was a brutal situation for the next guy to inherit. And the Tigers have not been relevant since. It's been 8 years since that, and they've had one winning season. They have never made the playoffs, and it still doesn't even really look like they're that close. Like, we've had times here and there where, maybe they have some pieces and like maybe if this and that goes right, they could do it. We still haven't really seen it from them, and it's been 8 years. Again, that is a very long time to have, and all of that started with the situation that Dave Dombrowski left them in. Chaim Bloom, on the other hand, inherited virtually the same situation, coming off of a disappointing season, worst farm system in baseball, aging core, about to trade the best player. Like, Chaim inherited virtually the same situation that Al Avila did, and he's taken them to the playoffs once already, which is more than Al Avila did. He's given them a much better farm system with a quality of major league roster. Because the Tigers did have a solid farm system in the year where they, lost like 40 games, or they lost like 120 games or whatever it was in 2019 when they had like the worst offense ever. And they have a competitive team. Like the Red Sox have had a competitive team to some degree in every year from 2021 to 23. The Tigers have had one competitive team in the last 8 years. And maybe this says more about Al Avila than it does about Chaim Bloom. But it certainly says something that Chaim Bloom was able to turn this roster around within 2 to 4 years, and the Tigers still haven't really done it in 8 years.
Yeah, it's a good point to make. And yeah, despite all, people will always mention the last place finishes, but the Red Sox had a winning record under the Chaim Bloom era.
Yeah.
Despite all the last place finishes, it's just like, yeah, one of the last place finishes was a 60-game season. The other, they were 6 games below 500, and if they do it this year, they could very well do it with a winning record. So I mean, like, yeah, they've won more than they've lost in the Bloom era. It hasn't been good. Like he didn't really crazy exceed expectations, but much as we've been talking about ad nauseum, much of the blame is not on Bloom, and it's on outside sources like ownership and whatnot. God, what was the point that you made before before talking about the Tigers, because I think I wanted to
It
extend
was
on that.
about how like anyone who celebrates Chaim Bloom's downfall is validating what John Henry wanted.
Right. Yeah, yeah. And to go to go along with that, yeah, the Red Sox will likely spend this offseason. They will likely get a marquee free agent of some sort, probably a starting pitcher, one of maybe Snell, Nola, or Yamamoto, maybe two of them, who knows. That is because ownership decided they wanted to spend more money and get more people on board with the Red Sox, because the Red Sox fan base's frustrations have grown too much for ownership at this point, and they want to sell tickets, they want to sell merch, they want people to be on board with the Boston Red Sox, and they're going to spend money, but that is not that is not money that
No.
Chaim Bloom would have refused to spend this offseason if he was given that proper budget.
Yeah.
It is going to be whoever the GM is going to be coming in, they're coming into a pretty good situation. According to Fangraphs, the Red Sox have the third best farm system in baseball. I know MLB Pipeline has them like 16th, but Baseball America also has them 5th. So, average it all out, they're like a top 10 farm system in baseball. They're probably going to have a lot of financial flexibility this coming off season. They're a few pieces away from being a playoff team. That's for sure. We can agree on that. And along with them having one of the better farm systems in baseball, they also have a good core of players that have like less than 2 years of service time. Notably Tristan Casas, who's in the Rookie of the Year running, Brian Bayo, who has really developed well this year, Jaron Duran, who's really developed well this year. I guess he's still considered a prospect, but Sedan Rafael is looking really good as a real like true utility guy, but is also really good, like doesn't deserve the marker of utility guy. But whoever's coming in is coming into a nice situation, and a lot of the reason why the Red Sox, or why the next GM is going to be coming into a good situation, is because of the actions of Chaim Bloom.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think I see three different possibilities with the next Red Sox, main executive, whoever it's going to be. One of them is they're going to hire Dave Dombrowski 2.0. They're going to spend a lot of money. They're going to trade a lot of the big name prospects and deplete the farm system that Chaim spent a lot of time building up. And they'll have a World Series window for a few years. But guess what? Anyone can do that. Any GM in baseball right now can make X trade and sign X player and make the Red Sox a World Series contender with the farm system that they have and the major league roster that they have. Anyone can do that. That's the easiest thing to do among the three possibilities. Number two is a guy that's going to keep the farm system intact, maybe sign a couple guys. And under that circumstance where the Red Sox are spending money and keeping the farm system, that further confirms the narrative that Henry wanted Bloom to be the fall guy, because you're essentially signing a guy that's doing the same work that Chaim Bloom was doing, but also John Henry's spending money to make it look like Chaim was the guy that didn't want to spend the money, right? Like that's going to confirm everything that I had just said. And number three is just entirely Chaim Bloom 2.0. The Reds, like John Henry's still not going to want to spend money, but they'll keep the farm system intact. They'll keep the major league roster that they have and go into next year with the same team. I think those are the three possibilities of what's going to happen here. That's what I see happening.
Yeah, and I think in that first example, we're basically just describing Dave
Dombrowski,
which is that's Red Sox former president of baseball ops. They won a World Series under him, and despite him getting fired kind of soon, I think we would both agree he did a pretty good job. It ended in a World Series, and it's a lot of because of what he built, but also a lot of because ownership allowed him to do stuff. But what Dave Dombrowski essentially did, he came in after 2015. Ben Cherington was in charge from 2012 to 2015, like mid 2015, and what Cherington did, he didn't sign too many marquee free agents, or at least under his wing, they didn't sign a lot of free agents. He denied a lot of enticing trades. He denied a Matt Harvey trade that would have sent Mookie Betts to the Mets, I believe. He denied a Cole Hamels trade that I think involved Xander Bogaerts. And Dave Dombrowski came in.
Would have made those deals.
he would have made those deals at the time, but he used the players that Sherrington did not trade and ended up being really high level major league talent, guys like Mookie Betts and Xander Bogaerts, along with Andrew Benintendi and Jackie Bradley Jr. Like, he used those guys for the MLB roster and built on it using trades from what their prospects were at the time: Moncada, Kopech, Anderson Espinoza, Manuel Margot for the Craig Kimbrell trade. Like, he used the prospects they used, and he used the MLB talent on the roster. Those guys could have been traded by Sherrington, but were decided not to. I think I see a lot of that happening. That could potentially happen with this next GM. Is, Rafael is still there. Like, he could have been traded for one of these pitchers in this past trade deadline. This next GM is going to keep Rafaela around on the roster and use him, and maybe trade some other top prospect that's not on the MLB roster right now. That's probably best case scenario in that situation. Hopefully he doesn't trade anybody in that young core. But yeah, what I'm sort of hoping for is like a hiring of like Chaim Bloom with the money, which would just be offensive to Chaim Bloom. It would be kind of like Chaim Bloom would. It would really make me pissed off if I was Chaim Bloom, because Chaim Bloom with the money is just like Chaim Bloom with
Is just Chaim
ownership's
Bloom
approval.
with exactly. It's Chaim Bloom with ownership's approval. That's exactly it. I do want to talk about this farm system, by the way, because we've talked so much about it. We haven't really gotten into it. Like you said, they are ranked, in the top 5 on several of the publications, whether it be Fangraphs, Baseball America, Baseball Prospectus, also. But not a lot of people have talked about like the guys in it, like the top guys, because Jeff Passan went on radio yesterday and he said that the Red Sox farm system is Orioles-like. The Orioles have the best farm system. They still have guys coming through. And you got to keep in mind what the Orioles did to get that farm system compared to what the Red Sox did. The Orioles were the worst team in baseball from 2019 through 21. They had, first overall draft picks a couple of times. They had, or at least once, right? And they had the first round overall draft pick once. They had top 5 picks every single year. And they hit on all of them, yes. Like, they drafted Adley Rutschman first overall. They drafted Gunnar Henderson in the second round that same year. They drafted Jackson Holliday first overall. They drafted Colton Cowser 5th overall. They drafted Heston Kjerstad 2nd overall. Like, they drafted all these guys very early in the draft. The Red Sox had a top 5 pick once. They had it once. And most of those top prospects, those are Chaim's guys, whether he signed them internationally, whether he drafted them at a non prestigious spot. Like Roman Anthony, the guy that might be their top organizational prospect heading into next year, he was drafted in the 2nd round, and he was playing in high school 18 months ago, and now he's tearing up AA, which AA, I know that it's not the highest level, but it's arguably the level with the most talent, because AAA is filled with a lot of guys that are either quad A players or guys in their like mid to late 30s that are just trying to stay in professional baseball, right? Like when we went to a Woo Sox game and we saw Derek Holland in the clubhouse, like that's what AAA is, right? AA is where you're facing the best talent, and Roman Anthony is already, he has like a 900 OPS there when, again, he was playing in high school 18 months ago. Kyle Teal, who they drafted in the 1st round of this year, 14th overall, like not a clear 1st round pick where exactly who you're going to get and who's going to be available. He has an 1100 OPS in AA already. Like, the Red Sox have guys that are going to be contributing to the major league team in their farm system. And that I didn't even talk about Marcelo Meyer. I didn't even talk about Nick York. Like, there are guys that I left out. Those are just the 2 examples that are tearing up AA right now. And then that doesn't get into, Sedan Rafaela on the roster right now, Tristan Casas, who's a Rookie of the Year candidate, Wilyer Abreu, who's looked really good, who has very strong batted ball metrics for the Sox so far in a small sample size. Like, they have guys that are going to be contributing to the major league roster that are in their system right now that Chaim built up.
Yeah, and like Bloom, even if he didn't select some of them or internationally draft some of them, he had the will to keep them around and not dish them off for a temporary fix on a roster that needed more than a temporary fix. and I think also Dombrowski deserves a teensy bit of credit at the 2019 trade deadline for not taking really any action and not trading someone like Tristan Cassis or Jarren Duran, who look to be, you know, long-term pieces for the Red Sox and guys they might want to try to extend this year, which, you know, good on Dombrowski and Bloom for not trading them as prospects when there was a lot of holes on the MLB roster that, you know, a lot of people wanted to fix. So even if Bloom didn't, you know, draft Cassis or sign Rafaela internationally, he kept them around. You know, that development system was under Bloom, and they're succeeding because of a lot of, you know, the coaching and you know, analytics departments and whatnot. So yeah, like he could have traded some of these guys and decided not to. And yeah, I mean, going back into the, you know, diving back a little bit into that, you know, into the last couple of trade deadlines, like, you know, they were not one piece away from making the playoffs. They're 7 games back in the wild card right now, I believe. You know, as you mentioned, if they got Jordan Montgomery, the best starting pitcher, what's ended up being the best starting pitcher acquisition, you know, they once every 5 starts, they'd probably get 5 to 6 innings, 2 to 3 earned runs allowed. They'd win maybe 6 out of 10 of his starts, as opposed to like 3 out of 10 of some other schmuck starts. And they'd end up this season 4 games back at the wild card spot instead of 7. And then we would have, and maybe they traded off someone that would have helped the Red Sox in the future on the MLB roster. So yeah, I mean, like, yeah, I don't understand everybody saying that this past trade deadline was a failure. I could see the argument for maybe selling off Paxton or Duvall, but I think the results have showed that it was a good decision not to trade off at the trade deadline. And I by the way, I don't want to hear anything. I don't want to hear anything about how it affects the clubhouse, because the Angels probably were pretty on board when they traded for all those guys with Giolito, Lopez, Crone, and Grichuk, and they completely fell apart afterwards, and they ended up selling out their players for nothing.
Yeah, and like, this is not even us speaking in hindsight about the trade deadline. Like, Chris and I both said on this show, I said on my Twitter, if I had a conversation with you, I said this, that the trade deadline was going to be a very underwhelming year for buyers. And it, you know, in a lot of cases wasn't great for sellers either. It was pretty good for sellers in some cases, sure, but not for Adam Duvall, but for like Aaron Savali, where like the Rays had to trade one of their top organizational prospects, which was more than the Red Sox were willing to do, and fairly so. Like, it was just not going. It was never going to be a good trade deadline, really, for the situation that the Red Sox were in, and
there was
not moving. Yeah,
there was not a single player where we came on after the trade or after the deadline and we were like, wow, this is a game changer. This is going to get them. This is going to get them that ring. This is going to be their game winner. Like, there was not a single guy out there. It was,
except for like Verlander, but like the Red Sox were never doing that, and I don't think any Red Sox fans wanted that. Or Scherzer, right? Which, you know,
exactly.
Unfortunately, he's out for the year now, but that's a hindsight thing.
And even with Scherzer, we were critical. We knew he had an ERA over 4, a FIP over like 4.5.
Yeah, and he did look better with the Rangers, but unfortunately, you know, as it goes, he is hurt now for the rest of the season.
It is unfortunate, and yeah, Verlander was doing well, but not at his Cy Young level, and he cost 2 like top 50 prospects or something like that.
He cost two of the top 3 prospects in the Astros system, I believe.
Yeah, so 2 of the top 3 prospects in the Astros system.
Again, to make your team marginally better and still miss the playoffs.
Yeah, in the Red Sox scenario, it made more sense for the Astros, but the Red Sox are not the Astros this year. Everybody knows that. So, yeah, people will point out the trade deadline when talking about why Chaim should have been fired, but I think that's part of the reason why Bloom should stay, because he made the hard decision not to do anything or not to buy anything. And I think it's been proven over time that, yeah, that was the correct decision. It was a seller's market, and the Red Sox were not really in a position to buy, and they were in a position to build for the future. If you want to criticize him for not selling, I kind of understand that, but even then, they didn't have any big pieces to really sell off and get much out of.
And not only that, but if let's say they trade Paxton, they trade Duvall, right? And maybe even they trade Verdugo. All right, let's put those three things out there. They're really not getting that much of value in return at any point. Even if it was a seller's market, that like those names just aren't getting you guys. It's definitely not getting you major leaguers that are going to contribute, and it's probably not even going to get you minor leaguers that are going to contribute. They're not getting, top 10 organizational pieces for any of those guys. Maybe Verdugo, but still probably not. And the Red Sox would probably, be in around the same situation that they are in right now, where they're hovering 500, they're 6, 7 games out of a playoff spot. And those same people are saying, well, what if they just kept Paxton and Duvall? We could have been more in it. We would have had another starter. We would have had another bat. Like Duran went down. We could have had this outfielder. And that's what people are going to say in that scenario. And we're going to talk about, well, what if they kept those guys and they could have been more in contention? Well, we've seen what happened there. Like there was just no scenario that the Red Sox were going to come out big winners of this deadline. Like it's not, and that's simply not any. It's not. I don't even think that's owner's fault. I think that's just what it is. Like it was an underwhelming trade deadline, generally speaking, with players that were available, and the Red Sox didn't have a lot of guys that they could get a lot of value for. Like there was just no way they could have come out big winners. Especially in hindsight, now that a lot of the big pieces that went haven't panned out. And that's not even me speaking in hindsight. I kind of predicted that.
Yeah, and that isn't really a situation that's even exclusive to the Red Sox. I know the Giants sort of endured that. They were sort of a middling team, or they were more in a playoff spot because the NL wild card, there's less of a standard for that. Like the AL wild card race, there's way better teams in it, way better records in it than the NL wild card race, and that's why the Giants are competing. But people aren't predicting that the Giants are going to win the World Series this year, and there's good reason for that. And they didn't really take any actions. I'm sure there were some fans frustrated with that, but that was ultimately probably the right move, especially considering if you had a dartboard of all these starting pitchers that were traded for in this past trade deadline, and you threw a dart, the odds of you landing on a successful trade is very low, very, very low.
It's like hitting bullseye.
Yeah, it's like hitting bullseye. Like Jordan Montgomery, I got him. The 1 out of 10 chance that I was able to get a hit, I got, and he's and now we're going to be 5 games back of the wild card instead of 7.
Yeah.
So,
and again, maybe Aaron Savali, he's been solid for the Rays, but again, the Rays traded Kyle Manzardo to get him.
Yes.
Like that's a tough. Like that's there are plenty of guys that, and if you're willing to trade with some prospects to get some guys in return, you can do better with Aaron Savali than the farm system that you have. That's just what it is.
Yeah, like the Red Sox equivalent probably would have been like Ceddanne Rafaela, and look how good, like he's looking really good on the MLB roster right now, and the Red Sox will have him for 6+ years. Well,
and even if you wanted, yeah, exactly, and even if you wanted to trade him, you could get a better pitcher than Aaron Savali. I promise you. Yeah,
100%. So I guess all in all, we wish Chaim Bloom well.
I still have a few things I want to get into.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
So there's that rumor that's going around the media right now about like allegedly Chaim Bloom was offered from a team to trade Chris Sale with his entire salary to get like a couple players back, and Chaim wanted better players, so he said no. I'm calling BS on that. There's no way. Logistically, it wouldn't make sense based on what Henry has ordered him to do. It's too perfect for him to have said no, because John Henry would have said yes before Chaim even had a chance to say no, if that happened. And secondly, if you've been a Boston sports fan for long enough, you understand what the media and the front office do to people that leave town, no matter who they were. Like when Terry Francona was fired at the end of 2011, it was leaked from the front office that he was a drug addict and that he was like in a bad marriage and like a lot of crazy stuff about his personal life. Again, the winningest manager in franchise history, the guy that broke the curse and won 2 World Series with the Red Sox. That's how they showed him the door on his way out. When Mookie was traded, right? The Boston Globe published all that stuff about his his contract negotiations that painted him in a bad light. They do this with every person. Don't fall for it. I promise you, First of all, I promise you a team did not look at Chris Sale, who had just broken his hand on his second start, coming back from his second consecutive long-term injury at his age, and said, I want that guy and all of his money. I promise you that didn't happen. The only way I'd believe it is if Chaim Bloom admitted it himself. But it probably came from the front office, and that's someone who works in John Henry's best interest, right?
Right. Yeah.
I promise you that did not happen.
Someone,
Or
yeah,
it did,
trying to
it's
get a
extremely
promotion.
misleading. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, it doesn't make any real logical sense. Like if the report didn't exist and you just hypothetically threw it out there, it'd be like, oh, that's a pretty funny joke that you just said. Yeah, you should. That's pretty funny.
I mean, look, you could be an anonymous front office member and go to the media and say, actually, the Angels offered Shohei Ohtani for the number 50 prospect in the Red Sox system, and Chaim said no because he wanted Mike Trout too, with the Angels still taking on that entire contract. You see how easy it is to say that?
Yeah.
Like that's all it is.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then the
Especially
last thing,
it would go against too many philosophies. Like it would go against ownership philosophy of not spending over the past couple years. It would go against like Chaim Bloom's philosophy. Like he likes young talent. He probably doesn't like an aging contract. And I think the report was also that along with taking Sale on full contract, full like $30 million a year, along with all that, they wouldn't ask for anything besides Chris Sale, and they'd add their own little prospects into this package. Like they would give players along with all of the money that would be on this guy who hadn't really had a good season since 2018.
Yeah, dude, that's like the free iPhone in this link. Like they're like, yes. Come on now. Like you think people are falling for that?
Yeah, it's the AI robot in my DMs telling me she wants to meet up.
Yeah. Exactly. Like it's and you know why that stuff exists? It's because people fall for it. Like someone in the front office knows if we say this to the media, people will run with it. Like people will. Like not only will the media run with it, but some fans will run with it. But like, come on now. Let's be honest with ourselves here. That's total BS. And I have one last point. Was there anything else that you wanted to say about this entire thing?
I just reacting to that. I think also people like to dislike Chaim. People like to dislike Chaim Bloom. I think he also represented like the new school thing that a lot of people hate. He represented analytics.
He's the nerd with the computer that never played the game, right?
Yeah, he represented all that. Whereas Dave Dombrowski represented, big time baseball. Sign the guys that are good. That's what you do. And Chaim Bloom represented like the analytics, people like us, let's be honest. But yeah, like he represented that sort of thing that people generally hate. So people sort of wanted to dislike him. I'm not going to say from the beginning, but after a few moves, that's kind of what people wanted to paint him as.
So the Red Sox are now going to begin their process searching for the next GM, the next head executive, whatever they're going to call that person. And whoever comes into that will be, yes, inheriting a very good situation. But if you're looking at the bigger picture, the Red Sox last two GM, their president of baseball ops, chief baseball officers, whatever, have been fired for doing exactly what they were supposed to do. Dave Dombrowski was hired to deplete the farm system to build a World Series contender right now and win a World Series and leave the Red Sox eventually with a barren wasteland of a farm system and a lot of question marks. He did that and he was fired. Chaim Bloom was brought in to replenish the farm system, trade the best player, and do all these impossible tasks. And he did them. He did exactly what we expected he would do in terms of building a good farm system and, X, Y, and Z. He was fired for doing what the owners ordered him to do. That is 2 consecutive jobs where someone did what they wanted, did what owners wanted them to do, and got fired for it on a short leash. If you are any self-respecting, proven winner GM, why would you take this job? Why would you take the Red Sox job knowing whatever ownership wants you to do, you're going to do it, and the second things go a little bit wrong, you're gone, you're kicked to the curb, and we're gonna blame you for everything, and you're gonna be the source of all our problems. Who is going to take that job that is a proven winner?
Yeah, it's a really hard ask considering the fate of this last, GM. I'll just call him a GM. The last GM and the one before him also, like Dave Dombrowski. They didn't really like shame him out the door, but they fired him very quickly. And maybe it was a mutual parting ways. Like maybe Dave Dombrowski also just didn't want to clean up his own mess.
It's the same thing as Detroit. He saw what was ahead and he was like, that isn't someone else's problem. I'm going to go to Philly, where I'm also inheriting a talented team with a lot of money. I'm going to take them to the World Series.
Yeah, like so
that's also one of my favorite things, by the way, is when people point out that the Red Sox shouldn't have fired Dave Dombrowski because look what he's doing in Philly. It's like, man, do you think he would have brought the Red Sox to the World Series by now? Like, get out of here.
It's hilarious to
Get
think
out
about.
of here with that.
But yeah, like the last three Red Sox general managers have lasted less than 4 years each. Two of those GMs won World Series with the team. That just never happens. That rarely ever happens. When James Click got fired from the Astros after they won the World Series, it was giant news. It was like, what the heck are the Astros doing? The Red Sox have basically done that a couple times, and they've done that with Chaim Bloom. I know he didn't win a World Series, but he has, they were 2 wins away from going to one. So there is that, and he did basically everything that ownership asked him to, including go into the door that they asked him to go out into, because that's what they did. They told him don't let the door hit your ass on the way out, and that's pretty much what happened.
And Sean McAdam of Mass Live wrote a column detailing exactly what we're trying to say, but ownership has dug themselves a hole with this hiring process, with their candidates knowing what they did to the last 2 guys and what they will probably do to them as well.
Yeah, 100%. Especially like if you're known for winning, if you have had a job with a lot of job security before, like, yeah, you don't want to get involved in this. You don't want to be like, hey family, let's move to Boston, where I'm going to have this job for 3 years, even if I do exactly what ownership tells me to do. Yeah, it's a really, really tough ask. There's no,
it's like being like a billionaire moving into this huge mansion, but like the last 2 families that live there were like brutally murdered. Like,
right.
That's what the next guy is inheriting. That's what it is.
And the murderer lives next door.
Yeah, and the murderer, yeah, exactly. Actually, the murderer is like a landlord.
Yeah. So yeah,
even though that's not how it works, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's something analogous in that sense, for sure. It's really rough. Like, yeah, they've done exactly. Yeah, the past 2 GMs have done exactly what they've been ordered to do, and gotten fired for it. So yeah, I wish Chaim Bloom well. I think he will probably get another job of this power.
I think the funniest possible outcome is that the Angels fire Perry Manassian, hire Chaim Bloom, and then order him to trade Mike Trout.
That will be hilarious, and then people will say that Chaim Bloom traded Mookie Betts and Mike Trout.
Yeah.
Not Artie Moreno and John Henry.
Yeah.
And shout out, like, I think another point I was going to mention, I don't really have to go into it too hard, but when people look at the Angels and a lot of their problems, people know to blame the owner. People know that a lot of it is not on the GM. It's been a long-term problem. It's lasted more than any GM that they've hired.
I think it's easy to see in that case, though, because the Angels have had Jerry Dipoto, they've had Billy Epler, they've had Perry Manassian, and nothing has changed. Chaim Bloom has been the first guy where the Red Sox have been mediocre, right? They were great under Dombrowski. They won a World Series under Cherington, even though they probably had a worse record under Cherington. And, they won 2 under Theo.
Yeah. Yeah, that is true. Like, so it's easier to see through the owner's nonsense when they just never succeed. So yeah, but I think over time, hope over time people see through it. But overall, I mean, I hope for the Red Sox success. I hope that the Red Sox spend in the offseason and get a good starting pitcher, two good starting pitchers, hopefully, and allow their GM to spend the money that they should be able to spend. So that's what I hope for. I hope the best for Chaim Bloom. I think he was really screwed out of the situation. I hope he doesn't have to go through an experience like this ever again as a potential GM. I hope he gets treated much more fairly by his owners and how the owners, defend them or don't defend them in the media. I hope he has, better days ahead. Because he was hired for a reason. He was hired because he's a really smart guy and knows a lot about baseball, and he'll probably be hired again because he brought this farm system from 30th to top 5, and also
years.
almost making the World Series in that time frame.
Yeah, mind you, he brought the farm system from 30th to top 5 with one top 5 draft pick.
Yeah.
Like when, like when the Orioles did it, they had draft picks every year. When the Tigers did it, they had top draft picks every year. The Red Sox did it without that. Point to another situation where someone's done that in a 4-year span, and I will credit you because I can't name one.
Right. Exactly. Like the Dodgers just permanently, like, they're always top 5. Like they write it in the report like years ahead. Like, they're top 5. They're going to be in there. But
they also never went from 30th to
they've never
wherever.
Yeah, exactly. They've never been bottom of the barrel in that respect. So it's quite quite the thing to talk about. I enjoyed talking about it. And I think people in the know will give Chaim Bloom another chance, because you could argue he wasn't really given much of a chance in Boston.
I don't think I think that's just the correct argument. Saying you could argument doesn't do it justice.
Exactly. Like, Jeff Passan put out a good tweet. It was refreshing to see a baseball media member of that caliber just spit the truth about it and talk about, basically break down Chaim Bloom's tenure in 280 characters or less that effectively. Like, that was really good. He's been talking about it on podcasts and stuff, just saying things that are just objectively correct. And I won't be surprised when Chaim Bloom is eventually a GM once again, probably in the next couple of years. I would expect that he gets hired somewhere else. I hope the Red Sox hire someone somewhat similar to him. I know it'll be frustrating to fans, but like, just sign. And it would be frustrating to Chaim Bloom because he's not being able to finish the job that he started. But I hope they hire someone, in a Dodgers or Diamondbacks or Orioles organization, and extend on this and spend more, and be able to, win championships like we grew up watching,
Yeah.
So anything more on the Chaim Bloom tenure?
If you are listening to this and you have been anti-Chaim Bloom, I understand what made you think that way, but please shift your anger towards ownership. That's all. Yeah. That's what, we wouldn't have talked for an hour about this if we weren't trying to give more context and understand where people's anger should be focused.
Yeah, 100%. So that moves on to the next GM news regarding an MLB team. We will not talk for an hour about this because we're not as strongly opinionated about it. And yes, I understand, we're both Red Sox fans, so we care a lot more about the Red Sox, but this is a really unique situation. I don't know if any ownership group handles their general managers like this. Like, the Red Sox are an extremely reactionary team, an extremely reactionary ownership group, none like we've ever seen. Maybe George Steinbrenner is the other guy, but in the 21st
that was with
century,
managers. But that was with managers, not even GMs. Yeah,
that was with managers, and in the 21st century, we just have not seen this. It's pretty crazy. David Stearns was longtime Brewers general manager, has been hired by the Mets. They've kind of had his eye on him for a while, is what everybody's saying. What did you think about the Mets picking up David Stearns as their next GM?
Is he replacing Billy Epler? Or is he still in the organization? What's his official title?
Oh yeah, I think he's
Is he
president of
president of
baseball
baseball ops?
operations.
Yeah, that kind of fair because Billy Epler is still, there. But I love this move for the Mets. David Stearns, if you don't know, was the GM of the Milwaukee Brewers for the last, I don't know exactly how long, probably like 7 to 10 years or so. But the Milwaukee Brewers are going to most likely going to win the division this year. They're going to make their fifth playoff appearance in 6 years, I think.
Yeah,
Right?
I'm pretty
18,
sure.
19, 20, 21. Yeah, fifth playoff appearance in 6 years.
Yeah.
As a small market team with a bottom 10 payroll consistently, which proves, they have an effective method of finding their guys, right? I mean, they have a great pitching staff that they've developed with Corbin Burns, Brandon Woodruff, and Freddie Peralta. Those are all guys that they drafted, signed, developed, whatever. Offense, there's still been a lot to be desired, but regardless, with a small payroll, they've been able to build a really solid team year in, year out. And part of that is because of a weak division, yes, but there still is clearly something to be said. Now, the issue with the Brewers has been ownership not willing to spend a lot of money. They're at the point where they're threatening relocation because, they don't spend a lot of money and people are seeing that for what it is. And the best organizations are, the Dodgers, the Astros, the ones that combine analytical focus with spending money, right? Like, we always talk about how the Dodgers are the Rays with money, right? Like the Astros, like that's what they are. The Braves have come into that conversation recently as well. The Mets spend money. We know that. There's no doubt about that. But they have kind of been behind the eight ball analytic wise, right? I mean, like they don't have a pitching, like they just built a pitching lab this year, I believe. Like which is like 6 years too late or so. They have been behind the eight ball. But David Stearns is going to bring them back up to speed because the Brewers are up there, and he's going to bring them to where the Brewers were, and they're going to combine that knowledge with Steve Cohen's spending abilities, and that's going to create a really good system in Queens where the Mets are ideally within 5 years a consistent contender with a strong farm.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, David Stearns, I believe it was said he's 38 years old, which is pretty crazy to
Yeah.
think about. Very, very young gentleman. And yeah, you hope that uh, ownership has the patience that they need, or the patience that he needs. It's Steve Cohen, and he has a lot of impact on the baseball activity going on. So yeah, you hope that they can, be patient throughout this. Maybe next year is not where the Mets necessarily wanted to be. That they kind of told Max Scherzer that next year is going to be a bridge year, which is not what you want to hear when you have like a $300 million payroll or around there. So yeah, it was time for a little bit of a organizational divergence, like just kind of a recorrection. They wanna make sure they have the right guy because Steve Cohen's probably going to be there for a while. That philosophy of spending a lot of money is probably going to be there for a while. So they want the right GM to be there to put them in the best spot possible because yeah, sometimes teams spend a lot of money and just don't have the proper development and they don't succeed. Look at the Angels. I think they had to get under the luxury tax this year. But they are in a horrible position because they lack player development and lack a good farm system. Same thing with the White Sox is they've spent a lot of money the past few years, but they lack player development. They lack a good farm system. So the Mets sort of want to avoid that and they want to be in the right direction. And David Stearns, it seems like from what everybody is talking about, it seems like that's going to be a good move there.
Yeah, no, I'm very excited to see what the Mets will be able to become with the combination of David Stearns' knowledge and Steve Cohen's spending abilities.
Yeah, 100%. And what's good about this from a Mets perspective is this is a guy who's already proven. It's not like they're taking some assistant GM, some number two guy, some director of player development, and trying to make him in charge and do something he hasn't done before. David Stearns has done this before with a lot less money. It seems like it's hard to find the negatives in a move like this.
Yeah, no doubt about it. This is, it's going to take a while to see what this actually becomes, obviously. But because the Mets have a lot of guys locked up, we might not see a lot of the David Stearns acquired players consistently in the starting lineup for a couple of years, but this is a long-term hire, no doubt.
Yeah, they have their share of like, they have players that are good now that maybe in 4 to 5 years might be considered under bad contracts, or like, not at their peak form, and or not what the Mets signed them up to be. I know, they signed Brandon Nimmo for 8 years, like through his like age 38 season or 37 season. Lindor's there for a while. So yeah, they'll be racked up in bills, but luckily from what we've seen, that doesn't seem to really concern Steve Cohen too much. I think he's willing to take on bad contracts. He's willing to sign guys for 8-year deals just to get the first few years of that deal and the production of the first few years of that deal. So yeah, I mean, yeah, with this, it seems like they're trying to just avoid being the team that always has to spend money to compensate for their bad development, and just be that team that spends money along with good development.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have too much else to say on it. It seems
I think
like,
that's kind of the extent of what we had.
yeah. Shout out to the Mets. I mean, yeah, the Chaim Bloom it's just way too much to talk about, and we could have gone for way longer too.
Yeah,
But yeah, anything more before we get into players to highlight?
I think that's kind of it.
All right, so now we will get into players. After being negative or sort of negative for about an hour, we had about 4 minutes of positivity with David Stearns, and now we will get into more positivity with our Friday, September 15th, 2023 edition of How About That?
He's striking out less, walking more, and he's also making better contact.
Turning into a strikeout machine just out of nowhere.
He's been excellent all around this year.
He is getting a
How about that?
Yeah, so for my how about that, this is big one today. I'm very proud to be highlighting this guy because you and I have have questioned a lot about him, specifically his existence. But Royce Lewis from the Minnesota Twins has been on the field and contributing for the Minnesota Twins. Since
Wow.
August 15th, he is slashing 276, 356, 581 for a 937 OPS, a 155 weighted runs created plus, and 1.2 Fangraphs wins above replacements. Before this span, he had a ground ball rate of 43.2%, and in this span, he has lowered it to just 27.7%. That is the 8th lowest ground ball rate among the 208 hitters with at least 50 batted balls in this span. Throughout this year, he has raked against four-seam fastballs, and in this span, he is doing it even more. On 34 plate appearances ending on four-seam fastballs in this span, he is hitting 357 and slugging 786. His run value of 6.9 ranks the 7th highest in baseball in that span. So he's been a top 10 hitter against fastballs. His strikeout rate has also gone from 28.2% before this span to just 18.6%, and his walk rate has gone from 3% to 10.2%. And this means that his swing decisions have massively improved in this time. His chase rate has gone from 38.6% to 31.3%. His zone swing rate has gone from 64.1% to 68.7%. And also, his outside contact percent has gone from 60.6% to 67.8%. And his zone contact rate has gone from 82.6% to 88.6%, which essentially means that he's making the better decisions on when to swing, and he's also making contact a lot more. So Royce Lewis has done a lot of things really nicely for the Twins over the last month.
Yes, Royce Lewis.
How about that?
Yeah, so if you're wondering like what we mean by existence of Royce Lewis, has kind of been a running joke for almost the entirety of the existence of our show.
Unfortunately.
Because like it's largely like just the fact that we hadn't seen, he'd been a number 1 overall draft pick back in 2017. Is that correct?
He was drafted 2017. Yeah.
Yeah, 2017 first overall draft pick. And he was consistently a top prospect, especially in the twin system. I'm just trying to, I've been on my computer because I've been looking at the prospect ranks over the last several years. And yeah, since 2018, from 2018 through 2021, he was always a top 20 MLB prospect, but we really had no proof of his existence just because I think he had been injured a couple times. He was unable to like play. He was unable to really rise within the Twins farm system. So we just determined that he just didn't exist. He wasn't a real person.
Yeah.
But now that he's finally come up and he's contributing for the Major League Baseball team, the Minnesota Twins, he's
division,
like
probably division winner too.
Yeah, he probably does exist.
He's probably like out there breathing somewhere, which is big.
It's a big development. It's a big development in our show, and I'm happy for him. I'm happy.
Yeah, the
entity that is Royce Lewis. I'm happy for that.
Yeah, no, it's listen, it gave me a lot of joy to type that name on this document.
Yes, indeed. So shout out to Royce Lewis. He's really raking. He's hit a couple grand slams. That's pretty nice. Love to see that for Royce Lewis. My how about that is a subject. I've been pretty subject happy lately.
You've been very subject heavy. I was really hoping you were going to transition into like he's hit a couple grand slams. He looks good, and he's my. But alas.
But alas, yes. My subject is the Cubs starting pitching. I was fairly low on them heading into the season. I didn't love Stroman and Tyon being like their highest paid guys. I like Justin Steele. He was my player to watch. I didn't, Kyle Hendricks was sort of on the decline, and I wasn't in love with it. But in their last 20 games, Cubs starters have a 2.46 ERA and 3.42 FIP and 113 and a third innings pitched. And in this span, the Cubs starting staff has the lowest ERA, 4th lowest FIP, highest FWAR, 5th lowest home runs per 9, and 2nd lowest walk percentage. They are also 3rd in innings per start in this span. So not only are they preventing runs, they're preventing runs while also going deeper into the games than 27 other pitching, 27 other starting staffs. So just breaking it down individually, Justin Steele, our just collective Cy Young favorite at this point, who we would put down on the ballot if given a ballot right now. Justin Steele has been excellent. He has 3 starts in this Cubs 20-game span. He has 21 innings under his belt in that span. That's 7 innings per start. Only one earned run allowed for a 0.43 ERA and a 1.21 FIP. So that has not been a matter of luck. Jordan Wicks, who has come up and been a big surprise for the Cubs. He has 4 starts in this 20-game span with 22 2/3 innings pitched, a 1.99 ERA and 3.17 FIP. And then along with that, both Kyle Hendricks and Javier Assad both have 4 starts, 22 or more innings, ERAs below 3.2 and FIPs below 4. And Kyle Hendricks specifically has a 3.39 FIP. So his FIP is far below 4, and he's not necessarily known for fielding independent pitching, but he's been doing very well with that. And along with that, the Cubs starting staff has an 80% left on base rate, which ranks 3rd in baseball in this span. Sometimes that can be seen as a bit of luck, but it's working out for them. The Cubs, with runners in scoring position, Cubs starters allow a 218 on base percentage and 290 slugging percentage, which are 3rd and 4th lowest respectively in this span. They're doing especially well. They're doing well all around, but they're doing especially well with runners in scoring position to prevent those runs from coming in. And they also have a 22% strikeout minus walk rate with runners in scoring position, which is the 4th highest among starting staffs with runners in scoring position in this span. And also with runners in scoring position, they have the 2nd lowest expected slugging and 3rd lowest expected WOBA in this span with runners in scoring position as a starting staff. So, people might point out their left on base percentage is a point of luck, but their expected numbers with runners in scoring position are very low. It just seems like they elevate their performance with runners in scoring position, at least in this 20 game span. So the Cubs, they're trying to maintain their playoff spot. They've been the 5th seed for a while now. Actually, they've been like firmly the 5th seed in that playoff picture for a while, and a lot of that has to do lately with their starting pitchers. So shout out to the Cubs starting pitchers.
How about that?
All right. And now we will go from the highs to the lows, where we're talking players and subjects that have been underperforming for our Friday, September 15, 2023 edition of Slightly Alarming Statistics. He's been barreling up the ball way less.
He's not missing bats. He's not getting the ball on the ground, and people are hitting it in the air more.
It's been so bad. He is getting a
Slightly alarming.
Yeah, so for my slightly alarming, I am staying in the same division that I did my how about that. Actually, no, I'm not. Never mind. Oh my God, why did I say that? He's not there anymore. Well, this is awkward. I'm talking about Whit Merrifield. He is not in the AL Central. Same, blue team still. Like, I still associate him with the Royals. Anyway, he is with the Toronto Blue Jays now, and since August 16th, he is slashing 168, 198, 211 for a 409 OPS and a 5 weighted runs created plus, along with a minus 0.7 FWAR. He ranks dead last among the 168 qualifiers in slugging, OPS, weighted runs created plus, and FWAR. He also has a 175 expected batting average, which ranks second lowest, and a 225 expected slugging, which ranks dead last as well. So his expected numbers are kind of just as bad as his on the surface numbers. Throughout this span, his fly ball rate is 29.6%, and his hard hit rate on fly balls is 8.3%. The league average is 44.6%. He's at 8.3%. If you know Whit Merrifield, you know that he's a contact-heavy guy with not a lot of power. So a 29% fly ball rate is not ideal for him. His expected batting average on fly balls is 0.67, is 0.067. That ranks third worst among the 199 hitters with at least 50 batted balls in the span. And his 129 X slugging on fly balls is the second worst on that same list. And in this span, 25.9% of his batted balls have been fly balls below the hard hit threshold, which means they are fly balls 94 miles per hour or below. 25.9% of his total batted balls have been that, and that is the highest rate on that aforementioned list of 199 players. So Whit Merrifield is not making the right kind of contact, and the Blue Jays just endured a brutal 4-game sweep of the Texas Rangers at home, which, Whit Merrifield is in part, small part, but in part, responsible for the Blue Jays' kind of underperformance as of late.
Yeah, Whit Merrifield.
Slightly alarming.
Yeah, he's been. Yeah, I mean, it's not the best. He has been known to have a good amount of success, especially led the league in hits 2 years in a row. But yeah, very unfortunate, and yeah, not the best to have fly balls when you don't really have home run power. Because it, I think the league BABIP on fly balls is like under 130 typically. So, it's if it's a fly ball that lands in play, it's usually just not going to be a hit. My slightly alarming is actually, unfortunately, we've talked about this guy a couple times. Not for bad reasons, for good reasons, because yeah, he was a player to watch of mine, so this is a talk of shame. And he was a how about that of yours, so this is a freeze over actually. No. So we've highlighted him a couple times for various reasons, but I'm talking about Ha-Sung Kim. And I'm not super alarmed. He's still overall having a very, very good season, and still likely a hit of mine for players to watch, but he's kind of just struggled over the last 12 games. And it's been sort of eye-popping, and I had to highlight him here. In his last 12 games, Ha-Sung Kim is hitting 180 with a 421 OPS. Out of 169 qualifiers in this span, his slugging is third lowest and OPS is fifth lowest. Out of 97 hitters with 50-plus plate appearances in this span, his expected batting average is 4th lowest, and his expected slugging and expected WOBA are the lowest in baseball out of anyone with 50-plus plate appearances in this span. Also in this span, Ha-Seong Kim, this is 12 games, by the way. He has 0 extra base hits and 0 barrels. He also has an 84.9 miles per hour 84.9 mile per hour average exit velocity in the span. And out of 89 hitters with 200 plus pitches seen in this span, his average exit velocity is the 4th lowest in baseball. Also with Ha-Seong Kim, it has been a decrease in, ideal hitting, batted ball direction. His fly ball rate has gone from 26% before the span to 16% in this span, which has, contributed to the lack of barrels and, the lack of extra base hits. And none of the 6 fly balls that he has hit have been a hard hit ball. So he is 0 for 6 on the fly balls that he does hit. And that fly ball rate has also decreased, which has decreased his overall production. And what has been substituting his fly balls have been ground balls. His ground ball rate has gone from 41% before the span to 51% in the span. Typically, fly balls just get better results than ground balls. I guess in Ha-Seong Kim's case, he's not necessarily a big barreler of baseballs, but he does have, I think, close to 20 home runs this season. So he does have that potential. And unfortunately, also Ha-Seong Kim's strikeout rate has increased from 19% before the span to 25% in the span. So Ha-Seong Kim is making a lot of soft contact. He's hitting less fly balls and therefore less barrels. He's hitting more ground balls, and he's also striking out a lot more. So he was at one point like a good MVP, a decent MVP candidate. If we're being honest, all the nerds were looking out, rooting for it because of, how niche he is. But he was, arguably a top 10 player in the game this year. Could still be, but yeah, he's over the last 12 games, he's been struggling, and he is getting a
slightly alarming,
along with a freeze over. And
unfortunate.
That does it. Unfortunate, but still probably ahead of mine, or one of the better hits of mine.
Has to be, yeah, absolutely has to be.
So yeah, that does it for players to highlight. Now we will get into a preview of the weekend ahead. That I will be looking at the series to watch. Daniel will be looking at the day-by-day pitching matchups. And for me, I have 3 series that I am particularly looking at, although I think any series with a playoff contender is kind of a series to watch. But as far as the 3 series I'm looking at, we got D-backs Cubs once again. This was featured in the last preview of the weekend ahead because they're playing so close together. But this one will be in Arizona on the West Coast between the Diamondbacks and Cubs. Diamondbacks are fighting for their wild card spot. Cubs want to maintain where they're at in the playoffs and potentially even go closer to the Brewers. So that is definitely something to watch. Along with that, we have the Mariners and Dodgers. Mariners are kind of hanging on to their spot in the American League playoff picture by a thread, although the Blue Jays have made sure that they're staying in that playoff race. Yeah, they're actually a game and a half up on the Blue Jays, but the Mariners do have a lot of stakes to maintain their playoff spot and face off against these Dodgers, who are going to provide a tough test to them. And then the premier series to watch, a series that everyone should have their eyes on, and maybe didn't predict they should have their eyes on this series at the beginning of the year, especially this late in the year. But it's the Rays and the Orioles. It's at Camden Yards.
Intense series.
It is an intense series. It is a 4-game series. It started yesterday where the Rays won, and now they are only 1 game back of the Orioles, who have been in control for a while now. But it is a 4-game series at Camden Yards, a potential future playoff series. So if you need more incentive to watch this, it's going to be wonderful. I'm definitely going to have my eyes on it, and I can't wait to watch more of this series. What do you have for the day-by-day pitching matchups?
Yeah, the Rays won a good one last night. It was 4-3. Luke Raley hit a go-ahead home run, and I believe the seventh inning. Pete Fairbanks was like unstoppable out of that bullpen in the ninth inning. It was a lot of fun. Tonight for pitching matchups on Friday, Garrett Cole and Johan Oviedo will be facing each other in Yankees Pirates. That series at PNC Park. Bryce Elder will be facing the Marlins for the NL East champion Atlanta Braves. That one is in Miami. Zach Eflin and Jack Flaherty will be facing each other in Rays Orioles tonight. Brian Bayo and Jose Barrios will be facing each other in Red Sox Blue Jays at Rogers Center. Hunter Green will be facing the Mets for the Reds at Citi Field. John Gray and Lucas Giolito will face each other in Rangers Guardians. That's a 2021 classic, probably. Bailey Ober, who is one of my favorites, will be going for the Twins against the White Sox at Getty Radio. Christian Javier and Zach Greinke will be going against each other in Astros Royals. That is in KC. You will have Aaron Nola going for the Phillies against the Cardinals in St. Louis. Logan Webb will be going for the Giants against the Rockies at Coors. Tarek Skubal will be facing the Angels for the Tigers. That will be in Anaheim. Justin Steele and Brandon Pfaadt will face each other in Cubs Diamondbacks. And this matchup of the night comes from Dodgers and Mariners. It is Bobby Miller versus George Kirby.
Yeah, that's yeah. I mean, talk about young pitching talent. That is the cream of the crop right there.
Yeah, a couple of young righties there.
It will be
on
funny
Saturday,
to see. Sorry, but it will be funny to see Kirby throw like 115 pitches. After that whole debacle, that media debacle earlier.
He had to pitch like a complete game shutout.
Yeah,
and he still comes out. He throws an immaculate inning in the ninth. He's like, yeah, I really didn't want to be out there, actually. I thought someone could have done better. On Saturday, you will have Chris Sale going for the Red Sox against Chris. You have no idea what pitch I'm about to throw next. Bassett for the Blue Jays. Chris Bassett's one of my new favorite pitchers after seeing his pitch arsenal. Mason Miller, who has really good stuff, will be going for the A's against the Padres in Oakland. Dane Dunning and Tanner Bybee will face each other in Rangers Guardians in Cleveland. You will have Andrew Abbott you have Cole Reagans facing the Astros for the Royals in Kansas City. Andrew Abbott will be going for the Reds against the Mets. You will have Pablo Lopez going for the Twins against the White Sox. Corbin Burns going for the Brewers against the Nationals in Milwaukee. Ranger Suarez and Miles Michaelis will face each other in Phillies Cardinals in St. Louis. We have a classic don't throw it above 91 miles per hour matchup in Arizona. It is Kyle Hendricks versus Zach Davies. Sawyer Gibson Long, who looked good in his last outing for the Tigers, I swear that's a real guy, will be facing the Angels. I promise you that's a real guy. Clayton Kershaw and Bryce Miller will face each other in Dodgers and Mariners, and matchup of the night again, or not again, but it's going to come from Rays Orioles. It is Glasnow versus Grayson Rodriguez.
Yeah, Sawyer Gibson Long. He was on my Phillies Tigers square for Immaculate Grid today. He was
he actually?
No, he was
Oh.
I was about to say he won 31 games in the 1902 season.
No,
back when
I swear that is a real guy. He actually, I think he made his major league debut his last time out, and he looked pretty good. He pitched 5 innings, struck out 5, didn't walk anyone, allowed 2 earned runs on 4 hits.
Yeah, he just sounds like one of those guys where you look
that's his full name, but it's not listed on his Baseball Reference page.
Yeah, it's like, oh, he had 15
like
wins
Bullet.
his name is
like Bullet Long, but his real name is Sawyer Gibson.
Yeah, it's like, wow, he really got 15 WAR in 1905. That's crazy.
Exactly. So anyway, you should watch Sawyer Gibson Long on Saturday. On Sunday to finish out the weekend, Zach Littell and Dean Creamer will face each other in Rays Orioles. Zach Littell is on the Rays now. Noted for later. Carlos Rodon will be facing the Pirates for the Yankees in Pittsburgh. Hyun-Jin Ryu will be facing the Red Sox for the Blue Jays. Brandon Williamson and Jose Quintana will face each other in Reds Mets at Citi Field. Gavin Williams will be facing the Rangers for the Guardians in Cleveland. You will have Charlie Morton and Jesus Luzardo facing each other in Braves Marlins. Framber Valdez will be facing the Royals for the Astros. Brandon Woodruff, who's been really awesome in his last few outings, will be facing the Nationals for the Brewers in Milwaukee. Taijuan Walker will be facing the Cardinals for the Phillies. You will have Logan Gilbert facing the Dodgers for the Mariners. An interesting Sunday night matchup in Arizona. Jordan Wicks versus Ryan Nelson, a couple of young guys in Cubs Diamondbacks. And matchup of the afternoon comes from Twins White Sox. It is Sonny Gray versus Dylan Cease.
Ooh, potentially back-to-back like Cy Young runner-ups.
Yeah.
It's very possible.
Yep.
Very, very possible. Probably on track to happen.
Possibly.
Yeah, and it's very cool that the Diamondbacks are getting some SMB action
in Arizona too.
Yeah, for sure. Excited about that.
Probably could have been Rays Orioles, but you know what? No complaints over that series.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess no one was expecting Diamondbacks Cubs to be that premier game to watch, but also the Rays and Orioles were not projected
matchups
to
that are going to be on Sunday.
Yeah,
Tigers Angels, that's a real riveting matchup. Padres A's, another one, and then Dodgers Mariners. That'll be the only 4:00 game I'm watching.
Yeah, if it were April, we'd be like, yeah, why isn't Padres Angels like
the Sunday night baseball? No, it's Padres A's.
Oh, Padres A's, okay.
Yeah, and then Tigers Angels.
All right, yeah.
Yeah, no, I can understand why those aren't on Sunday Night Baseball.
Yeah. All right. Well, yeah, that with all that being said, there was a lot said in this episode, but that will do it for this installment of Above Replacement Radio. We hope you enjoyed this one. Maybe you didn't enjoy the dialogue, but I hope you enjoyed maybe you didn't enjoy the points we made, but I hope you enjoyed the entertainment of it all. If you are interested in checking out more content, subscribe on YouTube, or if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, just, go to the YouTube channel, subscribe to it, subscribe to our Apple Podcasts and Spotify feeds. Check out all the content we have. This is episode 270. We have so much that we've already done, including a baseball history series. There's that playlist on YouTube. We have 12 guest interviews. Most recently with Chris Cotillo before the Chaim Bloom firing. You get to hear pretty much, Chris Cotillo has been there for the entire Bloom era. With Mass Live as a Red Sox beat reporter. He was there for part of the Dombrowski era. So he really has a good perspective on what the Red Sox organization is about. And he has his own criticism about ownership, along with criticisms on Chaim Bloom, if we're being honest too. But go check out that interview for a little bit of retrospect on what this era has been. And that is, that's involved in the guest interview playlist on our YouTube channel. Along with that, follow us on social media. Follow me on Twitter, @Chris_Gianta. Follow Daniel on both Twitter and Instagram, @Daniel_Curran. And follow the show Instagram, @Above Replacement Radio for all the show needs. We hope you enjoyed this one, and we hope to see you next time, where we will be talking all the happenings in Major League Baseball once again. See you then.
This conversation is over.